Ancient remains of a sacrificed girl on top of a 5,500 meter volcano. Footprints from an extinct ancient human species burned into volcanic rock as they tried to escape an eruption. And hundreds of ancient skeletons found crammed inside seaside caves. These are disturbing discoveries found near volcanoes. More than 5,500 meters up on a volcano called Sara in southern Peru, archaeologists found the frozen body of a teenage Inca girl. They call her Sarita. She was discovered during surveys in the 90s, and she definitely didn't end up there by accident. She was part of something called a Capacocha ritual. The Inca would take young people to the tops of mountains as offerings to the gods. Around Sarita's body, researchers also found artifacts like miniature gold and silver figurines and pottery, all carefully arranged around her. The cold, dry air near the summit kept her relatively well preserved, by ancient dead body standards, that is. Researchers think the sacrificed would have died from exposure, like just left to die in the cold, or blunt force trauma. Definitely what I'd prefer. For the Inca, mountains weren't just mountains though. They called them apus, living beings that had power over things like weather and harvests. On February 20th, 1979, the Dieng Plateau in Indonesia looked completely calm. Then, gas started leaking from the craters. Gas was carbon dioxide, visible, odorless, and heavier than air. And then it started creeping into villages. By the time it cleared, 149 people were dead. People were found collapsed in the street, others were found inside their homes. It was horrific. Dieng is a whole complex of overlapping craters and vents, and the ground there constantly leaks volcanic gases. Usually it's minor, but pressure shifts underground can push out massive amounts all at once. Carbon dioxide pushes out the oxygen, and people can lose consciousness within minutes without even realizing anything is wrong. Monitoring improved after 1979, but the area has had gas scares since, with evacuations in both 2011 and 2017. So volcanoes don't always need to erupt to be deadly. We always think of them as such loud, obvious things, hot lava, but they can also be silent killers. In April 1815, Mount Tambora in Indonesia erupted. It was the most powerful volcanic eruption in recorded human history. Wiped out villages across the island of Sumbawa. For almost 200 years, there were stories about this lost culture buried somewhere under all the ash and debris. Well, in 2004, archaeologists from the University of Rhode Island, led by Haraldur Sigurdsson, started digging on the slopes of Tambora and actually found it. Buried under all the volcanic debris were the remains of a whole settlement. They found carbonized wooden houses, bronze bowls, ceramic pots, iron tools, and the skeletal remains of at least 2 people. Sigurdsson called it a kind of Pompeii of the East, because the ash locked everything exactly where it had been all those years ago. Tambora's eruption also messed with global climate so badly that 1816 became known as the year without a summer, with crop failures across Europe and North America. On February 1st, 1814, Mayon Volcano in the Philippines erupted. Lava flows and ash buried an entire town called Cagsawa. People ran into the stone church for shelter as everything came down around them. Hundreds died. Some put the death toll at over 1,000. When it was over, most of the town was just gone. The only thing still visible above ground today is the church bell tower. The rest of the building is buried under all this hardened volcanic debris, but homes, roads, and farmland are still down there under the ash. But that bell tower has become one of the most recognizable images in the Philippines, standing in this open field with Mayon's cone right behind it. It's kind of surreal and eerie to look at. It's this perfectly normal tower that just happens to be sitting in the middle of a field, nothing around it. On the slopes of an extinct volcano called Rocca Monfina in southern Italy, researchers found fossilized footprints pressed into hardened volcanic ash. The site is called Ciampate del Diavolo, or Devil's Footprints. Locals assumed for years that they were supernatural because the tracks go straight down an incredibly steep slope, and nobody could figure out how a person could walk that without slipping. In the early 2000s, scientists dated the ash layer to about 350,000 years ago. And the prints are extra cool because they most likely belong to Homo heidelbergensis. This was an ancient human species that lived roughly between 700,000 and 200,000 years ago. Think of them as a kind of middle chapter in human history. It came after Homo erectus, but before Neanderthals and us modern humans. They would have looked pretty rugged with big brow ridges and wide faces and thick, strong bodies. Their brains were almost as large as ours. They made wooden spears, they hunted large animals, they probably worked together in organized groups as well. A lot of scientists think they're the common ancestors of both Neanderthals in Europe and our own species in Africa. So, after an eruption sent out fresh ash, a group of these early humans walked downhill across it before it hardened. Trackways show multiple of them, what appears to be adults and possibly a younger one. They found heel marks, toe impressions, a spot where one of them looked like they slipped on the way down. 350,000-year-old footprints still sitting there. Pretty amazing. Lake Kivu sits on the border between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo, near active volcanoes. The threat here isn't lava, it's what's dissolved in the water. The deep layers of the lake hold enormous amounts of carbon dioxide and methane trapped under pressure far below the surface. Scientists started paying close attention after the 1986 Lake Nyos disaster in Cameroon, where a sudden CO2 release killed over 1,700 people in a matter of hours. Research published in journals like Geophysical Research Letters showed that Lake Kivu is far more gas than Nyos ever did. If the deep water got disturbed, say by volcanic activity, an earthquake, or a large landslide, that gas could rise rapidly in what's called a limnic eruption. CO2 would pour out across the surrounding lowlands. About 2 million people live along the shoreline. I mean, it would be a total catastrophe. So, Rwanda has actually started pulling the methane out of the lake and using it for energy production, which doubles as a way to reduce how much gas is sitting down there. The Labrie tar pits in California is famous for its remains of Ice Age animals like mammoths, direwolves, saber-toothed cats. What most people don't know is that they also found a human skeleton here. In 1914, workers discovered partial human remains that researchers later nicknamed the Labrie Woman. She'd been dated to around 9,000 years ago. Tar pits exist because petroleum seeps up through the cracks in the earth. Those cracks formed because the ground in Southern California has been shifting and moving for millions of years. But the Labrie Woman probably wasn't trapped there like the animals were. Researchers think she was intentionally buried at the site. Why? Who the hell knows? But out of the thousands of animal fossils across the whole site, she's the only human ever found there. Mount Etna in Sicily has been erupting for thousands of years, but people kept building towns on its slopes anyway. Archaeologists have dug up Roman and later settlements buried under hardened lava. They've found walls, streets, burials, all locked under layers of what was once molten rock. Etna doesn't always go up in a massive explosion. A lot of the time it just sends rivers of lava downhill slowly, pushing over everything in its path. Towns have been swallowed like that over the centuries, but lava doesn't preserve things the way ash does. It burns and crushes first, and then cools into solid rock. So when researchers dig into old lava fields and find remains of buildings underneath, those weren't already abandoned places. They were active communities that just happened to be in the wrong spot. On the island of Santorini, archaeologists found an entire Bronze Age city called Akrotiri, buried around 1600 BCE during what's known as the Minoan eruption. Excavations started in the 60s and turned up multi-story buildings, pottery still sitting on shelves, storage jars lined up against walls, and detailed frescoes, all preserved by ash. Almost no human remains were found anywhere in the city, which means people must have got some kind of warning and got out of there before the worst of it. The site is pretty incredible. Room layouts are clearly visible, and a lot of the artifacts were pretty well preserved. It's like everyone just walked out one day and never came back, which, more or less, is exactly what happened. The eruption was huge though, probably affecting civilizations across the region. Most people know about Pompeii. Fewer people know that a town called Herculaneum got hit by the same eruption of Vesuvius in 79 CE, and in some ways, what happened there is even more disturbing. Herculaneum was a wealthy Roman resort town right on the coast. When Vesuvius erupted, the town got buried under a different kind of volcanic material than Pompeii. It wasn't ash, but waves of superheated gas and rock moving at enormous speed. For a long time, researchers assumed most people escaped because hardly any bodies were found. In the 80s, archaeologists started excavating the old shoreline, the area between the town and where the sea used to be. What they found were hundreds of skeletons crammed into arched storage vaults, along the beach. People had run to the waterfront trying to escape by sea and then just got trapped there when the surge hit. Researchers think the temperature reached somewhere between 300 and 500 degrees Celsius. Death would have been essentially instantaneous, thankfully. But because Herculaneum was buried so deep and so fast, the skeletons were in unusually good condition. So good that researchers were able to recover DNA, identify diseases. They even found evidence of what people ate. One skeleton still had wooden furniture fused to the bones from the heat. Another had a bag of coins. A soldier was found with his sword, belt, and tools still attached. Another amazing find. And that has been the video for today. I will catch you, yes, you specifically, next time.